Thank you, Karina. Okay, I will do my presentation. When Karina proposed me to come here, I decided to say, okay, instead of talking about general approaches and everything, I will try to tell you which was my story, how we finished doing what we are doing now. And everything began in the medical domain, but within that we have learned here is not only applicable to the medical domain, but also in others. So the first thing is that what we mostly do is serious games. So this is games with the main purpose is not just pure entertainment, but the idea is to use it with other educational purposes. It could have many names. And the idea here is that there's no such a big differences in many cases when what now is being also done in the gamification domain. And there is plenty of opportunities to learn and to reuse experiences from one domain to the other. So the idea is that when you're doing a simulation, is that kind of gamification of something? In many cases now, there is apparently something that is very clear difference. I mean, gamification is only when you are using game thinking and game elements, but probably you are not using more things. Simulations is where you also have a kind of virtual world. And then serious games is where you also have a gameplay. But in many cases now, people are trying to involve you when you are doing gamification in a kind of gameplay. Because if not, it's very difficult to keep up with the engagement in a medium to long term. So we think that there's not such a clear boundaries, clear borders. And we think that all these three aspects, gamification, simulation, and serious games, are closely related. At the beginning, when we began to ask funding in Spain, if you were doing serious games or games, you were not serious. I mean, you were not a scientific group. So we decided, okay, let's look for a different name. And in the medical domain, we found this game-like application, or game-like simulations. And if we ask for funding for games, we didn't get it. And if we say, no, we're doing simulations, then we were funded. So the idea is that it appeared to be very clear boundaries here, but in some cases, when people try to simplify, which is the ideas behind that, in many cases you oversimplify. Because here we are the simulations. And the simulations are very important now in all the educational approaches. And probably it should be a little bit over there. But it's not very clear. In many cases, they are beautiful. Now in gamification, they are beautiful models. They're beautiful graphical presentation. And they help people to understand the main ideas. But in many cases, it's probably a little bit oversimplification. Here the thing is that even the serious game landscape is quite complex. So serious game could be used for many things, not only for learning. Even if the ones that we are more interested are mainly for learning, but it has been used many times in different domains, mainly military, medicine, science. And of course, they provide many benefits. Why the American Department of Defense has invested more than 20 million in America's army? Because it's able to attract the people that they want for their army. It's the new uncle needs you. So USA needs you to be in the army or in the military in general. But there are some other things. You can teach kids how to use fractions, which is one of the most relevant problems for your later development in mathematics. Or you can use also a game for trying to improve your social skills and avoid conflict, social conflict, or even, substance abuse or drugs or this kind of thing. So it can be used in plenty of different things. What is behind that? Behind that is that it's not anymore this simple pyramid about what do you do, what do you remember. Nowadays, if you go to the Bloom taxonomy, but that has been reinterpreted. The idea is that usually in many cases in education we are here. We are just in factual things, in remembering. We move in the concept, but it's very complex to climb up that thing for moving into really understanding and being able to use effectively the procedural knowledge, and let alone when you are trying to develop metacognitive skills. And the idea is that the games, and in some cases gamification, can help you to climb up this kind of structure. Moving from just remembering things to be able to apply knowledge and create new knowledge from your deep understanding of the things. Because the idea is that games, and in many cases gamification, make you to make decisions. So you need to make decisions, you need to live with this decision after, and the game could be cruel with you. But it's something that in gamification is not that clear, because as we saw yesterday, in some of the presentation, the punishment doesn't work that well in gamification. But in games, once that you are in a game, you assume that you can lose. So gaming is losing. But when you win, you feel that you are the king. So you are the emperor of your world. So this is wonderful. And the idea behind games is what? And actually it's the same thing that we want in many cases behind gamification. It's not only improving or changing user knowledge that appear to be in the easiest part, but actually what we want to do is to change user attitude and even to change their behavior, which is far more difficult. Everyone knows what are the general rules to be fit and to be, healthy through eating. And at the end, how many of us follow that? So it's, one thing is to know it, and the other thing is to be able to apply it and actually change your attitude so your behavior change completely. Sorry. And it's even, the arena is even bigger. What happened in this case? Now we're using games also for solving societal problems or scientific problems. So it was a problem of folding proteins. It was an MP complete problem. And it's supposed to be around 12 years of a very powerful computer for doing. They turned it into a game, and it was solved mainly by students from high school in 3 months. Now, for instance, Play to Cure, they are taking all the information for microDNA arrays, and they are turning into the environment when you should navigate with a spaceship. Then you are looking for a path there that could be, actually you are manually analyzing these microRNA samples. So there's plenty of things over there that were games or gamified approach, because this is a fully game. It looks like a game, but and it's fun and it's engaging. But I will not say fully that it's, a game. So I think that there are challenges that in this case I have identified for serious games, but are pretty common with gamification. One of the things is that if we want to make this discipline more scientific, we need a more scientifically grounded approaches. So the idea is, first thing is we need to identify more large success cases. Because in many cases, gamification is applied inside a company. So there's plenty of information that is not available. And usually in the cases where this is more successful, it's tightly coupled with their procedures. And they don't want to make their procedure public. So in many cases it's not very clear, it's not very replicable in other companies or in other cases. And of course we need to include scientific and formal evaluation when possible. And also we need to take in many cases, which is the current infrastructure. In many cases, in games, in medicine, this is very frequently done. So you say, oh no, when Second Life was the hype, say, okay, I will do a Second Life game where the doctors can talk between them and wherever. And say, okay, and where do you plan to deploy that? Say, no, at the hospital. They only need to open me some communication port. Come on. Did you ever talk with someone who is in a secure system, such a hospital? Okay, now please open up this communication port. Say, forget it. No one never. So you have a very good technical solution that will be never deployed. And also we need to take into account scalability and maintainability. We need to find ways to reduce the initial cost. Yesterday was also proposed of it. Do we have some tools that help us to do it in a more simple way so that it's affordable and so that the teacher can do it by themselves? And we need to reduce also the total cost of ownership in general. And the idea we need, if we are using in educational situation, we need to take into account curriculum and involving educators for sure. In our case, I think that the way to proceed is also sharing the actual game or the actual code. It's the only way. So you can go there, see how this has been implemented, and build on that, learn from that. And of course, we need to include formal evaluation. And the thing that we are now working is learning analytics. So the first thing also is that we think that this is pretty new, but it's not in many cases. Game has been used, for instance, in medicine. It's also true that medicine is one of the domains where games are used more frequently. This is the data from 2010, so it's not something so new. In the residency programs, they have been already using games. In many cases, games that are pretty simple, maybe multiple choice or this kind of Jeopardy games. But they can also use some very sophisticated simulation or games even. We cannot see that very clearly, but also there are differences between domains. For instance, in medicine, they have been using simulation for many years. They have a kind of classification, and they say simulation level 2. And what they describe as simulation level 2 is a screen-based simulation that is something that we can read as a serious game. And in many cases, some of the things that they do as a virtual patient could be something like a gamified interview with a patient. So they are really different vocabularies in different domains, and if we need to approach that domain, we need also to learn that there will be different vocabularies. So yesterday, learner was talking about different vocabularies, about how to create it, but also you need to communicate with your final users, with your clients. So it's important. And also it's important to think that in many cases, investment could be very different and the result could not be. For instance, in the games, if you move from a simple game like simulation to a AAA game, the cost will multiply by 1,000 at least. And the result could not be as expected. So which is the gain? In many cases, low fidelity simulation, where do you focus on the procedures and not on replicating all the environments in 3D wonderful graphical domains, could have similar results. It's also true that this was only tested with 28 participants. This is one of the problems also. It's when you test things, usually the experiments are not very big. Why? Because it's very expensive. Actually, testing a game, as I will say later, it could be as costly as producing the game. In the case of the game-like application or the gamified application, I have the same impression. This is because there are so few formal evaluations of those approaches. And one of the things, I mean, this is take it from Sebastian de Terdin, is it is possible to turn almost everything into a game or into a gamified procedure. And probably, yes, it is. So if you are able to identify which are the problems, the thing where people has a problem to fully understand what is behind that, and you are able to refocus or structure the stacks into goals, rule, and feedback, and then you play and iterate. The idea is that probably your first solution will be a bad one, but if you iterate and you begin to trying to understand which is the problem and how can you make that more engaging. And in many cases here, I will use more engaging than fun. Fun is something that happens in your head. And something that is fun for you could not be as fun for me. But the idea is it could be interesting for both of us. And this is something that I'm really interested in. And also, something that people don't take very much into account is, can we apply serious games? But do you need to do a feasibility analysis? And this is something that also you need to do in many cases in gamification, is that, okay, which is the benefits analysis? I mean, do we have a clear benefit here? What we want to obtain? In the gamification, it's also true that in many cases, there's the money behind. So if you only have a marginal gain, this marginal gain could be still very, very profitable. And when you are using that not for a website where you are selling things, but this, when you are using it for changing this attitude or behavior, in this case, do we have observables for knowing if this is already working or not? And we need to do this cost analysis because probably it could be a different approach that will be as successful, it could be cheaper. And can we do it? It is feasible with the resources that we have. In Spain, we tend to say, yeah, of course, let's do it, even if we don't have the budget, and then in many cases the solution will be poor because you don't have the resources. And here, with the games, one of the questions is, do games actually work? And it's the same with gamification. In many cases we have, the impression that works, but can we prove it? In many cases, and this is a problem, because even when you get the funding for creating a game or for doing a gamification approach, if you cannot prove that this is effective, you will not be as successful for getting the next round of funding for that game, for that approach. So we need to do kind of full formal evaluation. But this could be very, very expensive. So we need to also take into account from the early beginning of the project. Let's go to an example. So we were contacted by the Innovation Center in Aragon region. It's not in the Middle Age thing, it's here in Spain. So it's because they were deploying CPR, these kind of devices for if you are having a heart attack to all the middle schools and high schools in the region. And they say, okay, we're worried because the students are very curious about this beautiful device in bright colors. And if they see any student just on the floor, they will try to use it. So let's try to train all of them. And they don't have the money for sending medical doctors to all the schools. So we decided to do a game-like simulation. I mean, for all this kind of resuscitation procedures, and we create a simple game-like application. In this case, we did it with photos and micro videos, very short videos, and we created the three situations where you cannot breathe, and where you are having a heart attack, or where you are just fade out on the floor, and you need to decide what to do. The situation was putting your question and go through that. And the idea is, we did a formal evaluation, because there's a formal procedure that is called ILCOR. This is where the medical personnel follows. We simplified to be applied to high school students, and we do a formal evaluation. We have a control group, and we have an experimental group. The control group goes with the best educational situation we can manage to create. There were two emergency medical doctors with a defibrillator, with a medical mannequin, go into one of the classroom, and the other one goes only with the game for the same period of time. So what do you think it was the outcome of that? What was more successful, the medical doctor or the game? The game? Ah, come on, this is not realistic at all. Actually not, of course. I mean, the medical doctor were also doing role-playing with the students, say, okay, now you are the people who are having the heart attack, you're the people who cannot breathe, I will. Of course, the game was less successful than the medical doctors, but still with the game you learn quite a lot. And the thing is that, what is the cost of scaling up the application of the game if the game is free? It's nothing. Just to have the people at the school that have the capacity and the willingness to apply it, nothing else. So, but there we were able to prove that it was effective. Then we were contacted for creating a different game. One of the problems is that, which are the problems that appear in the operating room. So the kind of error made by all the medical personnel, I mean the anesthesiologists, the surgeons, and the nurses that are in the operating room. Say, can you work on that? And there's a thing that is called the surgical safety checklist. Which are the kind of question that you need to make in 3 different steps when you are in the operating room to reduce the number of errors. I mean, everyone remembers from TV counting up the things, so you don't leave anything inside the patient. But this is just one of the steps. So the first step is that they ask you your name, which is the procedure you will be carried out on you. And if you know about it, if you have give your consent and these kind of things. And this is, in many cases, not done. This is the reason because someone has been cut the wrong leg, or so it could be very, very serious. And this thing is very easy to apply. It takes only 5 minutes in 3 different times, and it reduces mortality and morbidity by more than 30%, independently of where the initial condition. It reduced the same at Boston, at the MGH, that's probably one of the best hospitals in the world, that in India, in Mumbai, one of the worst ones. So it's quite effective. And the idea is that this is behind all these kind of things of, I mean, don't trust your memory, try to use something that reminds you everything, but it's not only that. Also behind that is the thing that, how can you improve, I mean, the working condition that everyone is considered a team with their own responsibilities, so that the surgeon is not the king into the operating room, overruling all the things that it's considered by the anesthesiologists or the nurses. Everyone has their own responsibility. So the thing is that, okay, we have something that is very effective, that is very easy to apply, and at the end, it's not well applied. Why? It's because the people working at the operating room are cruel. They want to create problems. No, actually it's because in many cases, the implementation is poor because they don't fully understand things. They saw that, I mean, there's plenty of training done. For instance, in Madrid, and I think that in the whole Spain, this is mandatory. I mean, it's enforced. And the actual implementation continues to be poor. Why? Because people just see it as a burden, something else that is, I mean, kind of only a procedure that is even avoiding me to do my job. And it is not. So the thing is that, why is that? Because they don't fully understand what is behind that and what are the things that you can improve. So we created this checklist, also in the same kind of approach, in close cooperation with doctors from 3 different hospitals, including Harvard-MGH. The idea is that, can we do a simple game-like simulation where the doctors and all the medical personnel in the operating room can see which are the consequences of not applying that correctly? And the idea is that over there you can select your role, if you are a nurse, so your presentation in the game is better. And we have 2 cases. The thing here is that you can think about every kind of games, but doctors are reluctant of games. In many cases, they don't play at all, but they fully understand cases. So we try to close the gap between the thing that they are used to and they like it, that are mostly simulation cases, and the thing that we want to do. And we bring it together, and of course, we have a very simple case, a very complex case. All the surgeons go for the complex cases. Usually, nurses go for the simple case first, because they are far more disciplined. They can explore freely. There's these 3 stages before you are, I mean, they put you to anesthesia, they ask you things, so this is very important. If you go to a hospital, they don't ask your name, the procedure, if you have any kind of medical condition and everything, just try to get up and run, because then there's a 30% more possibilities of having problems. And of course, in that game, you can include random events, the team is not cooperating with you, and you need to react to that. So people began to fully understand that it's not only a list for reminding you things, it's also a procedure for improving the working ambience into the operating room. And of course, you have a direct feedback or a delayed feedback, depending, and say, okay, wrong patient. You have carried out a medical procedure on a patient that is not the correct one. And then you can, I mean, you will be visiting the court for several months after that, just because you don't want to use 30 seconds of your time making a couple of questions. And we carry out an evaluation. In this case, one of the problems is we don't consider that, I mean, we run out of money and time for do the full evaluation. So, because we want to do with more than 100 people from the operating room in 5 different hospitals. And we did it, but we only have the preliminary result, because at the end, we need to move to the next project, and we were not even able to do it, the full analysis. But the thing is that for this partial result, and we use a very formal thing about which is the kind of the perception, the procedural knowledge, and the utility, and it was pretty positive. The idea is that it results in an increase of utility, the perceived utility of the checklist, that the procedural knowledge has been improved, and a decrease of the perception of the effort. So they began to understand that it was not only creating problem for them, that this was actually helping them. So we are moving into changing of attitude, at least. We're not able to see if at the end that reduces the risk in the operating room, because this is very complex to evaluate. And here what is key is the collaboration with the experts, approaching to their own experience, vocabulary, and way to work. Because if not, I mean, it's very, very complex. In many cases, you have a beautiful idea of a game, but it will be admissible for them. Yesterday, Lerner was presenting this example where they decide will be the medieval theme. And this is lovely because they say, okay, for this kind of users, this is what is more adequate. But in many cases, we have also done some other experiments that I have not here. It's about how to classify your users. Not all of your users will respond equally to the kind of game you have devised. Because it will really depend very much on which are their gaming habits and what is the game frequency. This is very, very clear. In this case, the thing is that you need to create this shared understanding, you need to go for early design, early prototype, and test repeatedly with the doctors, in our case, till it was admissible for them. From this experience, from the experience of creating around 7 different games for the medical domain, we were able to create a methodology for game development. In this case, probably, it's a kind of strange thing because gamification appears here. So, as one part of the game design, it's because in many cases, then you need to create which is a virtual world, which is the decision making, because it was mainly oriented to procedural training. And also you need to decide which will be all the traps and things that you put there in terms of making the game more engaging for the user. And the idea is that you need to do all this quality assurance, because in the medical domain, of course, you should have not mistakes or error in the content, of course. And also, one thing here is that you can represent also something that it will be very difficult to represent in a clear procedure, such as tacit knowledge that is being applied but is not formalized anywhere. But here, what is really important is the aspect of evaluation. That's changed many things, because then you are able to prove that your game is being effective. But this is quite costly. So in this case, this methodology was oriented to procedural knowledge. We have created several game-like simulations. I mean, taking into account which is the description of the medical procedure and representative teaching cases. We have applied this, for instance, to the National Transplant Organization in Spain, that is the most successful organization in the world for representing all their procedures. Those games are not freely available because they have some ethical issues about when and why some of the transplant are discarded. And then, of course, but it's something that works pretty well, actually. There, the idea is that you need to do a close communication with the domain expert, in this case, the medical expert, because your expectation could be completely wrong. Something that you say, oh, this is wonderful, this game will work perfectly. They don't understand it, they don't like it, they don't know how to use it. And they say, oh, whoa. For us, it was complex. And also, rapid prototyping, in our case, was something really important. How do we do the early prototyping? At that time, we have eAdventure, that was a game platform where you can create this game-like simulation without programming, just connecting images. So even if you want to do a more complex game, you can use eAdventure, it was Java technology, to do the early prototyping. Even lately, you want to do differently and include more sophisticated environments. But the idea is that that's help, but at the end, the formal evaluation at least in medicine, need to be based on pre-post test. They want to have a very clear experiment conditions, and where you need to have a very clear idea what you will be evaluating there. And the idea is that, okay, this is the only way that, for instance, in medicine, they will consider that works. Do we have this same idea in gamification? We have a very clear idea of how to prove that our gamification approach works. In many companies, they say, after applying that, our revenue has increased by 5%, which is wonderful, but it's very difficult to replicate outside because you don't have all the things. So replicability is also one of the really key aspects in that part, and also in the full science approach. And the idea is, can we use something like data that we automatically acquire from the gameplay when the user is playing to do more or less the same? Let's say, so the idea is, can we check the way that we measure the game effectiveness or the game-like approach or the gamification effectiveness? This is something really important. In many cases, what we have there are black boxes. I mean, games or gamification things are closed. We don't know how this internally works, and we have very little information about what's happening there. What we have been working lately in the European project is about analytics and game learning analytics. So game analytics has been in the industry for many years. This is where big game studios use to test their games. This is collecting data about how the users play the game and everything. In the case of serious games or applied games, the idea is to use that data not only to try to keep the user playing for more time, but to learn if they are learning something. So the idea is to collect, analyze, and visualize data from these learners' interaction and try to get insight about what is happening there. This used to be very difficult and ad hoc. The idea is that you create a game and then you create the whole infrastructure for collecting the data. If you are the creator of World of Warcraft, makes sense because you are making plenty of money. But what happens if you are a small developer studio or you are just a research group? In this case, probably this is not affordable, or you don't have the full experience. Till now, it was ad hoc system collecting data for every single game. Or if you deploy it through one of the app markets, trust that Google or Apple will collect some data for you and will share with you. Actually, that data belongs to Google or Apple, not to you. And they only provide you with some data that they are interested, but not everything that you need. But here is a big development. This is Experience API that has been promoted by ADL, we're the creator of SCORM, and it has been enforced to be used for all the learning application that the Department of Defense will be buying in the next years. So that appears that this is likely to be the next de facto standard for learning application. And the idea is that it's based on activity stream, the same thing where Facebook knows everything about your life, same things that happen in the social networks, and like that, but it has been re-implemented for tracking users. In our group, in cooperation with ADL, we have created an application profile of ADL to be used with serious games. And we are now, we have already accepted as a contact point for this kind of this community of practice for serious game. And we are now considering to enlarge it for considering other different games, for instance, geolocalized games in one of the projects. Can this be used for gamified application? We think so. But the thing is that I think that gamification is on the hype. There's plenty of interest on that, but they still need to some development for being transformed into a more scientific domain. What we have been doing in the RAGE European project from the Horizon 2020 is that we have been creating all the infrastructure, the cloud infrastructure for collecting all the data, taking into account all kind of aspects of data protection, also analysis, visualization, and we also provide trackers. So the idea is that if you have already a very good game that is being produced in Unity or in HTML5 or in C#, then we have provided 3 trackers that you can plug in into your game and trying to send out which are the signals, which are the observables to be analyzed. The idea is that, of course, everyone will need something different. So how can we do something that is more general and it's not only ad hoc for every simple game? And there the thing is that there will be some game independent analysis. For instance, which is the maximum score, which is the minimum score, which is the average playing time, wherever. And it will be different from teachers, developers, or students. But this is also one thing that could be considered to give the user of the game some information about how they are doing. For all this general analysis, there's no any need of configuration. They are already programmed there, and it's open code. You can go to GitHub and install it in your own server. The idea is we don't want your data. This is the second thing is that we don't want to become the new Google or the new Apple just working on your data. You can deploy your own infrastructure. Yes, if you do it in Amazon, please, and you are in Europe, please be sure that you are using a cloud infrastructure that follows the EU regulation, and data is not going out to the United States, because if not, some agency will be probably listening. So this is the kind of dashboard that we're able to produce. There is still a problem about which is if an average teacher can understand this kind of analysis in an easy way. So in some cases, probably you need to create new analysis and new visualization, but our infrastructure can be extended to do that. The idea is that also there will be some game-dependent analysis that can be plugged in, because some observable or some signals have a special meaning in your game or in your gamified application. So from there you can create alerts or warnings. For instance, in one of the games we do is if one of the students is doing nothing for 4 minutes, tell me, because probably he has moved to Facebook or he's using his mobile device for doing something that is not close related. So these kind of things can be done. The general idea of the architecture is something like that. It's complex, but it's done. And it's Dockerized, so you deploy it in your server, and it should be working. And if not, please complain. We'll try to fix it as soon as possible. We are also working in evolving the idea. We were quite successful in some cases because we have this e-adventure platform where we were able to do this either game-like simulation in a short period of time and with a reduced money. But of course, we were not able to cope anymore with all the technological changes in mobile devices, tablets, and Android, and everything when they changed plenty of things. So we decided to move e-adventure, where we have already many users that fully understand this simplification of how to create a conversational 2D games. And then we move it on top of Unity. and we are working there. And the idea is we're working in creating this new EU adventure on top of Unity, where Unity will take care of all the multi-platform device thing. The idea is that you create only one code base that can be exported to different platforms. But we are not only doing that. We are also trying to relate this authoring platform with our learning analytics work. Can we, if you do if you create your game using UAdventure, can we provide you at least with the default learning analytics for free already in Experience API? That means that you will be compliant with the latest de facto standard. And this is exactly what we are doing now. The idea is that helping you to do the game learning analytics full cycle. The idea is that if you have a very good learning design that is being transformed into game design, you create the game. From that game, you send out through the tracker some information that create the analytics. And from this analytic that is stored in a learning record store, which is the database for this Experience API format. After that, you can do this visualization analysis and get feedback about if the game is being used as you expected, if all the game state has been reached, and everything. And here, we are also working in a second project that is beaconing. In RAIDS, we are responsible for creating the full infrastructure for the game learning analytics. I mean, trackers and the cloud infrastructure. In beaconing, we are also responsible for the game learning analytics, but more for the other perspective. So is that infrastructure understandable by teachers? Can we prove that this is effective? And also we need to extend that to a different environment with problem-based approach, and also we need to enrich the learning analytics for taking into account geolocalized games and accessibility information. The first experiment that we did on the first year was, okay, let's revisit our previous experience, because one of the things in science is replicability of results. So we get the game that was Java-based, using the first version that is not yet available as a product of UAdventure. We transform it into a Unity game, and we put the plugin for getting all the learning analytics. And then we decide to go to a actual school that has not a wonderful environment, so it's a real environment. It is Escolapias Puerta de Hierro. It's the nearest school from our building in Madrid. And we decided to train all the students from 12 to 16. There was some from 17 because he stayed for more than 1 year in the same course. But all of the 227 students from 12 to 16 years in all these CPR medical procedures in a systematic way. We're able to do only in 4 mornings, and we can do only in 2, but the thing is that the computer room is only 15 computers, so we need to do in 4 mornings. And there we do the pre-test, the complete gameplay, and the post-test, getting all the information. Of course, and there you can do things like that, for instance, which is more dependent for providing some information also to the school about which are the game habits or this kind of things. In this case, gender and frequency of playing was completely important. We compare the results with the previous one that we have done in Aragon region, and we're not as good there, but still shows that the learning was happening. And now, what are we doing? We are trying to use some machine learning approach to see if once that we have a validated game, can we predict what are the scores without needing the need to do the full evaluation after the game has been validated. So, and here we will use only pre-test plus all the game traces, all the learning analytics, or even only with game traces. So this is a wonderful idea if we are successful. The idea is that then we can run the game and without asking them, have a clear idea what they have learned. We have also run an experiment about which is the, I mean, if this is effective when the time goes by, because we have unique identifiers, we can run the experiment even in 3-4 months, because we have already a full experimental setting for doing. And they like it. Even a simple game, they like it. There was a kind of tag word from their free comments at the end. And they like it very much. So they consider that a game, even it's a simple one. Another study that we are now executing, it's what happens when you have people with special needs. And you have people who have, for instance, Down syndrome student using a very, very complex game. In this case, it's a game for improving their daily life conditions. It's for helping them to move around, to navigate the Madrid metro network. But this is quite complex. We have run an experiment with more than 50 students who have cognitive disabilities, mainly Down syndrome, with the Down Madrid Association, and in cooperation with another university. So the thing it has been very successful. We have appeared in a couple of TVs. So the idea, because we're trying to actually prove, even with these students, where it's very difficult to ask them with their impression, because in some cases, their communication abilities are very variable. And as finally, one more thing is what are we doing now is we have a game for being able to deal with cyberbullying in schools. The idea is a game that will be played by the student for between 20 and 35 minutes for creating the atmosphere for discussing which are the problems with cyberbullying. That is a very, very serious problem in our schools. In our case, the design base is based on research studies. We are trying to replicate all the situations that create the biggest numbers of conflict. And it's very curious because, for instance, cyberbullying affects more women than men, girls than boys at that age. And it has a very, very serious effect, including bulimia, anorexia, and even suicide. And it's very, very difficult to treat because it has any physical sign. So this is one of the things that we are doing now. Actually, we'll be running the first experiment tomorrow, and in the next couple of weeks. So we expect before the summer, just for the initial phase, having at least 200 students, only in the initial phase. We plan to do the second trials before the end of the year with around 400 and 1,000 students. So this is something that is also implying. So I think that I have covered the main challenges I was describing at the beginning, and I think that they are quite similar to the ones that are applicable with the gamification. So that's all. Thank you very much.